Hey guys, tonight we're heading to a place where the sun never seems to clock out, where the sand shimmers with so much heat it could fry a flatbread by noon, and where somehow people once sipped chilled drinks in the middle of the desert. You're waking up in ancient Persia. It's early, the kind of early where the stars are just fading and the date palms rustle like they're gossiping behind your back. You're lying on a woven mat tucked in a simple clay house that somehow still holds a bit of the coolness from last night's breeze. The air smells like dry stone hot dust and last night's lentil stew. Your mouth is dry, your eyes are gummy. And your first thought of the day isn't profound, it's, I need a drink, a cold one, which is of course absurd. You're in the middle of a scorched plateau, miles from the nearest glacier, and centuries before refrigeration. Cold doesn't exist here, except somehow it does. You throw on a loose robe and step out into the dawn. The sun isn't high yet, but already the world is heating up like a giant oven, slowly preheating for some divine bake-off. You trudge past sleepy goats, a boy chasing a chicken, and an old woman scolding a pigeon. Everyone is busy preparing for the heat, shading windows, draping cloths, muttering to the gods for mercy. And yet amid all this sun-scorched madness, you spot something strange. A servant walks past you, carefully balancing a sealed ceramic vessel. It's heavy frosted ever so slightly, and he's cradling it like it holds something precious. He does not explain, just a smirk that says, "You'll see." You follow. The ground crunches beneath your sandals as you leave the bustle of the village behind and follow a path carved into the desert floor. There's a quietness now, just the low whistle of wind over sand. And then you see it, a massive beehive-shaped dome rising from the earth like something misplaced from a moon colony. Pale, weather-worn, and oddly majestic. This is your first glimpse of a yakhchāl, a Persian ice house, and no, it's not a mirage. You step closer, half expecting it to be hot inside like an oven. But as you duck into the narrow entrance, cool air brushes your face like a secret. The walls are thick, nearly 2 meters in places, made of a special mix of sand, clay, egg whites, goat hair, and lime. The kind of recipe that sounds more like a punishment than engineering. But it works. It insulates, it breathes, it preserves. Inside, the servant lowers the jar into a shaded pit. You peer in. Ice. Real ice. Nestled in straw, glinting faintly like trapped moonlight. And it's not just stored here, it was made here too. You probably won't survive this. Seriously. The level of architectural ingenuity, mathematical precision, and raw persistence required to chill water in 40 degrees C desert heat makes your fridge look a little lazy. And don't even get started on how this might affect your opinion of ancient people. Spoiler. They were often smarter than we are, just with fewer coffee options. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander further into the yakhchāl, stepping carefully along the rim of a lowered chamber. The walls curve up like a gentle tunnel guiding warm air out through a vent at the top while cool air sinks and stays. It's quiet here, sacred almost. There's a scent earthy, mineral rich, mixed with something like snowmelt and date sugar. In your hand, someone has handed you a small cup. It's simple clay unglazed, cool to the touch. You sip. Cold water faintly floral, maybe infused with rose petals, or a pinch of crushed mint. A subtle luxury. The kind of thing that makes you close your eyes and forget briefly that you're standing in a glorified clay igloo in the middle of the desert. Historians still argue whether these yakhchāls were invented purely for food preservation, or if they began as luxury projects for royalty and expanded as the technology proved viable. What's not debated is this: they worked. And the people who built them weren't just desert dwellers, they were climate hackers. Outside, the sun is rising. Already the village is bracing for heat. But down here in the belly of this brilliant contraption, you sit in your robe, sipping chilled water and wondering what else the desert has been hiding from you. Hey guys, tonight we're heading to a place where the sun never seems to clock out, where the sand shimmers with so much heat it could fry a flatbread by noon, and where somehow people once sipped chilled drinks in the middle of the desert. You're waking up in ancient Persia. It's early, the kind of early where the stars are just fading and the date palms rustle like they're gossiping behind your back. You're lying on a woven mat tucked in a simple clay house that somehow still holds a bit of the coolness from last night's breeze. The air smells like dry stone hot dust and last night's lentil stew. Your mouth is dry, your eyes are gummy. And your first thought of the day isn't profound, it's, I need a drink, a cold one, which is of course absurd. You're in the middle of a scorched plateau, miles from the nearest glacier, and centuries before refrigeration. Cold doesn't exist here, except somehow it does. You throw on a loose robe and step out into the dawn. The sun isn't high yet, but already the world is heating up like a giant oven, slowly preheating for some divine bake-off. You trudge past sleepy goats, a boy chasing a chicken, and an old woman scolding a pigeon. Everyone is busy preparing for the heat, shading windows, draping cloths, muttering to the gods for mercy. And yet amid all this sun-scorched madness, you spot something strange. A servant walks past you, carefully balancing a sealed ceramic vessel. It's heavy frosted ever so slightly, and he's cradling it like it holds something precious. He does not explain, just a smirk that says, "You'll see." You follow. The ground crunches beneath your sandals as you leave the bustle of the village behind and follow a path carved into the desert floor. There's a quietness now, just the low whistle of wind over sand. And then you see it, a massive beehive-shaped dome rising from the earth like something misplaced from a moon colony. Pale, weather-worn, and oddly majestic. This is your first glimpse of a yakhchāl, a Persian ice house, and no, it's not a mirage. You step closer, half expecting it to be hot inside like an oven. But as you duck into the narrow entrance, cool air brushes your face like a secret. The walls are thick, nearly 2 meters in places, made of a special mix of sand, clay, egg whites, goat hair, and lime. The kind of recipe that sounds more like a punishment than engineering. But it works. It insulates, it breathes, it preserves. Inside, the servant lowers the jar into a shaded pit. You peer in. Ice. Real ice. Nestled in straw, glinting faintly like trapped moonlight. And it's not just stored here, it was made here too. You probably won't survive this. Seriously. The level of architectural ingenuity, mathematical precision, and raw persistence required to chill water in 40 degrees C desert heat makes your fridge look a little lazy. And don't even get started on how this might affect your opinion of ancient people. Spoiler. They were often smarter than we are, just with fewer coffee options. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander further into the yakhchāl, stepping carefully along the rim of a lowered chamber. The walls curve up like a gentle tunnel, guiding warm air out through a vent at the top while cool air sinks and stays. It's quiet here, sacred almost. There's a scent, earthy, mineral rich, mixed with something like snowmelt and date sugar. In your hand, someone has handed you a small cup. It's simple clay, unglazed, cool to the touch. You sip. Cold water, faintly floral, maybe infused with rose petals, or a pinch of crushed mint. A subtle luxury. The kind of thing that makes you close your eyes and forget briefly that you're standing in a glorified clay igloo in the middle of the desert. Historians still argue whether these yakhchāls were invented purely for food preservation, or if they began as luxury projects for royalty and expanded as the technology proved viable. What's not debated is this: they worked. And the people who built them weren't just desert dwellers, they were climate hackers. Outside, the sun is rising. Already the village is bracing for heat. But down here in the belly of this brilliant contraption, you sit in your robe, sipping chilled water and wondering what else the desert has been hiding from you. You follow the servant again, squinting into the light as you exit the cool yakhchāl and step back into the sun-soaked world. It's brighter now, too bright, the kind of light that makes your bones feel like they're being toasted from the inside out. You blink a few times and your eyes finally adjust. And there he is, same servant, same smirk. Only now he's pouring what looks like crushed ice into another jar and sealing it shut with a waxy cloth. He catches your eye and raises a brow as if to say, "Curious, aren't you?" Without waiting for your reply, he gestures for you to follow once more. So like the good little heat-stricken historian you are, you do. This time, the journey is longer. Past the date palms and the dusty goats, beyond the mud brick walls of the village. You're trudging across open land now, dry and golden, the earth cracking beneath your sandals. Far ahead, a camel groans, unimpressed by whatever task it's about to perform. But you're intrigued, because strapped to the side of that camel is a crate, inside it more jars. cold jars, carried in woven baskets stuffed with straw and cloth. And the servant, he's leading the way, as if this whole expedition is as normal as picking up eggs. Here's the part where your brain says, hold on, where exactly are we taking this ice? The answer is in the middle of nowhere, because this whole routine of transporting frozen jars across desert sand isn't some ceremonial drama for your benefit. It's how chilled drinks arrived at sunrise banquets, how sorbet made it to weddings, and how nobles quenched their thirst with iced rosewater when it was 110 degrees in the shade. And you're now part of this ancient, preposterous, entirely functional delivery system. You walk for what feels like an hour, which in desert terms means you've earned the right to complain at least twice. Finally, the procession stops at a ridge, overlooking a shaded garden. A royal retreat of sorts, grapevines twisting along wooden frames, a shallow pool glimmering faintly, and a pavilion in the center with cushions so plush you're half convinced they'll swallow you whole. A steward waits patiently, his expression unreadable. He accepts the icy cargo without a word, and with a fluid motion uncorks one of the jars. Inside, a delicate sorbet made with honey and snow speckled with tiny violet petals. One spoonful, and you can feel your brain quietly weep with joy. The Persians didn't just transport ice for practical reasons. They elevated it. To them, offering a chilled refreshment was a mark of hospitality, innovation, and let's be honest, flexing. It said, look what we can do even here, even now. And while the actual recipe for that violet sorbet might be lost to time historians, do believe Persian nobility were among the first to flavor snow and ice with fruit syrups, creating what may be the world's earliest frozen desserts. Just picture it, Alexander the Great visiting Persepolis and accidentally inventing brain freeze. But here's where things get even stranger. Some scholars argue the technique for preserving and serving ice in Persia predates similar methods in Greece or Rome by centuries. Others counter that the idea likely passed between cultures along early trade routes. There's still debate. Did it begin here in the deserts of Yazd and Kerman, or did the Persians refine an even older Mesopotamian practice? The records are fuzzy, like bad papyrus notes in the sand. Still, one thing's for certain, they weren't doing this just for refreshment. Cold was a symbol. Cold was controlled. And the ability to offer cold in heat, that was power. You wander the pavilion, your fingers sticky from the sorbet, and notice a bronze tray set with tiny glasses etched with floral designs, dew forming on their sides. You lift one. It's filled with sharbat, a syrupy infusion of fruits, herbs, and rose petals diluted with snow-cooled water. You sip. It's sweet and sour and alive. The kind of drink that makes your eyelids flutter just a little slower. In the distance, a harpist plays something soothing. A boy fans a noblewoman lazily. Somewhere behind you, a camel sighs dramatically. You, however, are too far gone in your chilled haze to care. This, you realize, is more than indulgence. It's a ritual. It's engineering wrapped in elegance. And yet, as you sink into the cushions, a breeze brushes past, a little too warm, a little too insistent. The sun has risen higher. The ice won't last forever. You lie back anyway, cold drink in hand, and watch the edges of your world shimmer slightly. Somehow it's not the heat that makes you dizzy. It's the absurd brilliance of a civilization that looked the desert in the eye and brought snow. You linger in the cool silence of the yakhchāl, letting the chilled water swirl across your tongue. It's a subtle kind of cold, not the sharp sting of ice cubes rattling in a glass, but something gentler, like a memory of snow. It seeps into you slowly, soothingly, like you're thawing in reverse. The walls curve around you like the inside of a conch shell. Every surface feels deliberate, angled to direct airflow, shaped to slow heat designed not by whim, but by centuries of trial and error. You trace a finger along the plastered wall. It's not smooth. There's texture to it. Fine cracks, gritty bumps, maybe even a wayward goat hair or two from the original mixture. Somehow it makes it feel more alive. Like this place isn't just architecture, it's a living creature, humming with quiet purpose. Outside, the sun climbs higher. Light filters in through the entrance, now brighter than before. You know it won't stay cool here forever. The ice won't last without attention. And so begins your next lesson in ancient refrigeration. You step outside again, blinking at the sudden burst of gold. The servant is waiting. He hands you a woven hat. It's lopsided, but you appreciate the gesture. Then wordlessly, he points to the structure next to the dome lower planar and partially sunken into the earth. You descend a few steps into what looks like a cellar but is a wind catcher chamber, or as the locals call it, a badger. You crouch beneath a stone archway, following the cool airflow as it slips past your ankles. It's not magic, it's physics. The tall vents on the surface catch prevailing winds and funnel them downward. The sudden shift in pressure creates airflow, which is cooled further by contact with moist surfaces or underground tunnels. It's like walking inside a breath. An elderly man appears wrapped in a teal sash and begins gesturing at the walls. He's speaking softly, pointing here and there. You don't understand the language, but the pride in his voice is unmistakable. He's explaining you realize how this entire cooling system works, not with electricity or buttons, but with angles, shadows, and an intimate understanding of desert temperament. You nod partly out of politeness and partly in awe. The air in here is genuinely cooler than outside, even though there's no ice. Just clever design. The old man pulls a lump of hardened clay from a basket and taps it meaningfully. He holds it up, then tosses it toward a corner where water trickles gently through a carved channel. A puff of cool mist rises. He winks. You have just witnessed the 500 BC version of air conditioning. Clay-cooled, wind-assisted, and entirely off-grid. Historians still debate the precise chronology of these inventions. Some believe wind catchers and yakhchāls were developed in tandem, while others suggest the badger came first. evolving from simpler cooling techniques used in Mesopotamian cellars. What no one disputes is that ancient Persians weren't just surviving the desert, they were outwitting it. The servant hands you another drink, this time not water, but a soft infusion of quince and basil. Cold again, of course. It's served in a slightly chipped turquoise cup, the glaze catching a faint glimmer of sunlight from above. You take a sip, and the flavors bloom in your mouth, tart herbal grounding. You sit on a low stone bench carved into the wall, cup in hand, and listen. The wind makes a slow rhythmic whisper as it travels through the shaft. Occasionally, a drop of water echoes somewhere in the dark. It's like being inside a song, quiet, constant cooling. And just when you think you've seen everything this place has to offer, the servant taps your shoulder. He points upward, past the edge of the dome toward the dusty ridgeline. You squint. At first you see nothing, but then movement. Far off, barely visible through the shimmering heat, a line of figures, small and deliberate, descended the mountain trail. They're carrying something. Ice. You weren't expecting that, were you? The sun is a little higher now, the shadows shrinking back like shy cats. But your focus isn't on the heat. It's on the strange, beautiful procession, winding its way down the dusty slope beyond the yakhchāl. They move slowly with the kind of purpose usually reserved for sacred relics or rare spices. And in a way, this is a kind of sacred delivery. They're bringing ice, a line of men robes pulled high, and heads wrapped in indigo and saffron scarves, each balancing crates or tightly bound bundles on their backs or on the flanks of camels. You can see the layers cloth wrapped over straw, packed around ceramic jars, and in those jars ice, maybe snow, probably both, or whatever hadn't melted yet. You blink unsure whether you're witnessing a caravan or an illusion brought on by too much sun and too little shade. But no, they're real, and they've been walking all night. The old man from the badger chamber reappears beside you, squinting into the light. He mutters something soft and approving. You get the sense he knows every person in that line. Maybe he trained them. Maybe he used to walk that same trail himself. You ask yourself, how does one even transport ice through a desert? And then you remember it's not about the ice surviving the journey. It's about how well it's wrapped. The ceramic jars are designed for insulation. The straw adds shock absorption. The cloth provides shade. And the journey happens at night when the air turns mercifully cooler and the desert loses some of its hunger. It's a system. One built not on technology but trust in time-tested patterns, clever materials, and the discipline to rise at midnight and walk until the sky burns gold again. Historians still puzzle over the exact routes these caravans took, and whether they relied on secret ice caches buried along the way. Some records suggest teams swapped shifts at relay points, keeping the jars moving non-stop, like a relay of frozen baton passing. Others argue that most ice never traveled more than a day's journey at a time, and that the key wasn't how far you went, but how many yakhchāls were placed like oases in a cooling chain. But standing here watching it happen in real time, none of that debate matters. You're seeing how and why braided together in one quietly miraculous moment. The caravan finally reaches the foot of the yakhchāl. With careful choreography, the ice jars are unloaded. There are no grand announcements, no drum rolls, just quiet precision. The jars are passed hand to hand, lowered into the storage pit, like small gods being returned to their temple. A younger apprentice cracks the wax seal on one of the jars, checks the interior, and nods. Ice intact. The men grin. Someone claps softly. There's pride here. Not the flashy kind, but the deep, cool pride of those who've done something improbable and made it look easy. And then comes the reward. From another chamber, a tray is brought out. Clay bowls, simple and elegant, filled with crushed ice, rose syrup, and shavings of something golden saffron, maybe. You're handed one, and the chill cuts through your palm like a whispered promise. You eat it slowly. The flavor is subtle but profound. Sweetness, floral softness, the minerality of snow, and the faintest bitterness of desert dust. It's like tasting a season that shouldn't exist here. Around you, the caravanners relax in the shade of the dome. Some nap. Others pass around water jars. A few trade jokes in low voices. There's laughter, the tired, easy kind that only comes when hard work meets a moment of rest. You lean back against the outer wall of the yakhchāl and let your eyelids drift half shut. The sun presses down, but the cold still lingers in your hands, on your tongue, in the air around your neck. And that's when it clicks. This wasn't just about drinks. This was about proof that even in the harshest environments, elegance could thrive. With enough willpower, planning, and pig-headed desert stubbornness, ice could be not only made, but shared. You smile to yourself, then sip the last of your rose ice, already melting fast. The air is shifting now, no longer crisp and quiet, but full of motion and preparation. You watch as the emptied jars are rinsed at a shallow trough, while others are carefully resealed with linen and wax for their next mission. The entire scene hums with the rhythm of routine, like a kitchen before a royal feast, or a theater troupe rehearsing just before curtain. You're still at the yakhchāl's base, but there's a sense that something grand is about to happen. The servant appears again. Of course he does now, wearing a slightly cleaner sash and holding what looks like a checklist scratched into a wooden tablet. He gestures. Time to go. You rise, dust yourself off, and trail behind him once more. The path this time doesn't wind into the wilderness. It skirts around a ridge and leads toward a hilltop platform that catches every possible breeze. At first, all you see is dry scrub, a few olive trees, and the silhouettes of sleepy pigeons. But then the land flattens out and opens into something unexpected. A carefully arranged outdoor banquet space shielded by stretched cloth and latticework screens, the kind of spot where the powerful lounge in silken ease while pretending the heat doesn't touch them. A pavilion rises in the center, open-sided and raised slightly on a polished stone base. Inside, more cushions than a reasonable person would know what to do with, and a low table already set with porcelain trays, brass pitchers, and small bowls holding dates, pistachios, and candied orange peel. You're waved toward a corner seat. You're not sure why you've been invited, but hey, no one's thrown you out yet. The servant leans in and whispers the theme, a sunrise feast. Not just any feast, but one meant to dazzle a visiting official, possibly even a satrap's cousin. And the main attraction, not the roasted lamb, not the spiced rice, not even the music. It's the ice, or more specifically, what they do with it. A nobleman enters with a confident sway, draped in teal and silver. He nods at the steward, who gives the subtlest of hand signals. And just like that, a flurry of activity erupts. Servants bring out jars, yes, those jars, and begin to open them one by one. Inside are not just blocks of ice, but pre-mixed confections. Sorbets, crushed fruit suspended in slush, chilled grape paste. You can't help but stare. They begin serving it with the kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred texts or antique poetry. One dish in particular catches your eye, a pomegranate and rose sorbet carved into the shape of a blooming flower. You take a spoonful. It's like tasting a snowstorm in July. Historians still debate how widespread these sunrise ice rituals were. Some argue they were confined to the royal courts of Persepolis and later cities. Others believe even middle-class merchants would attempt a scaled-down version during major festivals. What's clear is that by the Achaemenid era, iced desserts weren't just a novelty, they were a status symbol. If you could serve cold in the desert, you weren't just rich, you were refined. The nobleman raises his glass, signaling a toast. You're handed a cup of sharbat infused, this time with plum, basil seed, and saffron. The scent alone is enough to make your shoulders drop. You drink. The cold spreads through your chest like a quiet lullaby. To your left, a poet begins reciting verses, something about snow falling on the backs of lions. It's all very dramatic. Across the platform, a musician plays a slow looping tune on a four-stringed instrument, his fingers moving lazily, like he's trying not to wake the day. A boy circles the pavilion with a brass incense burner, trailing a ribbon of sandalwood and myrrh behind him. Even the smoke seems cooler here. You inhale deeply, the scent mingling with the taste of fruit and frost on your tongue. And just when you think the luxury has peaked, two servants approach, carrying what appears to be a giant bowl. A basin carved from alabaster filled with snow and studded with tiny candied violets. It glows in the morning light like some forgotten treasure. You don't remember the last time you smiled this much over a bowl of flavored snow. Probably never. But here, in the high desert sun among strangers who treat ice like a visiting monarch, you finally understand what they've been building toward all along. It isn't just engineering. It's storytelling. Every chilled sip, every icy spoonful, it all whispers the same tale. We live where we shouldn't, and we do what others think impossible. You've barely finished licking the last trace of pomegranate sorbet from your spoon when another servant glides past, replacing your empty bowl with a small glass dish filled with something even more mysterious. Crushed ice, dyed softly green, with what turns out to be powdered pistachio and mint. It sparkles slightly. You hesitate, then take a bite. Your brain momentarily forgets it's in a desert, and yet, here you are, lounging under linen canopies, the harsh sun politely filtered through trellis work, while around you nobles sip nibble and occasionally murmur their approval with the kind of restraint that says, yes, we do this all the time. No big deal. It is, however, a very big deal. You lean back, observing the flow of movement. Servants in saffron and russet robes move in coordinated pairs, refilling cups and rotating ice jars as casually as someone might turn a page. Off to one side, a woman with a scroll seems to be tallying the jars. How much has been served? What flavor combinations were most admired, and possibly which noble is secretly hoarding extra scoops behind his goblet? Across the platform, an elder in teal silk leans in and tells a story, a memory perhaps of a feast, where an ice shipment melted mid-journey and the host was forced to serve warm melon juice instead. The horror, the shame. The man reportedly spent a year at his winter estate in the mountains just to redeem his honor. You can't tell if this tale is true or just well-polished gossip, but everyone listening nods solemnly. That's the thing, cold is not just cold. In this world, it's symbolism. It's mastery. It says, I can tame the elements. I can turn thirst into poetry. In Persia, it wasn't enough to be wealthy. You had to show that your wealth could change the laws of nature, even if only for the span of a cup. Historians still discuss whether such displays were part of broader diplomatic strategies. Was a bowl of violet snow more persuasive than a troop of soldiers? Did the ability to serve sorbet at a border negotiation sway rivals into seeing Persia as more than a threat, as something aspirational? There are no ledgers or treaties that say it outright, but the timing is suggestive. The cooler the feast, the warmer the alliance. You finish your pistachio mint slush and are handed yet another variation, this time a shaved ice treat made from tamarind sweetened with mulberry syrup and served with a tiny wooden spoon. The flavors are tart and rich, and your senses feel both awakened and soothed, like someone just tucked you into a bed made of sunlight and silk. A young servant boy, clearly new to all this, trips slightly while balancing a tray, and a noble catches the falling cup before it shatters. There's a pause, and then laughter, the kind that ripples warm and forgiving. A second cup is poured, no harm done. Even the ice seems to relax a bit. You start to wonder just how many flavors these people have invented. Rose tamarind, quince plum, grape saffron, mint basil fig. Every combination is a new kind of luxury. Not just for the taste, but for the impossibility of it. Each bite whispers, we shouldn't be able to do this. And yet, here we are. Behind you, a musician plucks a new tune, soft and circular, like a lullaby for the sun. The nobleman with the teal robe reclines more deeply into his cushions and begins humming along. For a moment, it feels as if the entire pavilion is swaying gently, not with wind, but with shared satisfaction. And all around the ice endures for now. You watch a servant pack away another jar, resealing it with practiced hands. This ritual is not chaotic. It's measured, controlled. The jars will return to the yakhchāl. They'll be stored again, cooled again, and reused. Efficiency and elegance in one smooth motion. And just when you think the magic has reached its limit, a small bird, dusty gold, possibly a desert finch, flutters into the pavilion and perches on a tray of melting ice. It dips its beak once, twice, then flies away. Everyone watches in silence, because even the birds, it seems, know where the cold lives. Time begins to blur. Whether from the steady hum of music, the syrup-laced sharbat still swirling in your veins, or the lazy rhythm of shadows shifting across the pavilion floor, you're not sure. But something has softened. Even the nobles speak slower, now their voices low, as if afraid too much noise might melt the remaining jars. You stretch your legs, still barefoot from earlier, and wander out toward the edge of the pavilion. There, the stone floor gives way to a small terrace overlooking a narrow channel of water, a qanat. Not just a decorative stream, but a functional artery of life in this unforgiving place. The water flows soundlessly, drawn from miles away through underground aqueducts carved by hand and stubbornness. You kneel beside it and dip your fingers into the flow. It's cool, shockingly so, cooler than it should be in this heat. You trail your hand through it, marveling at how something so ancient can feel so fresh. Qanats, you learn, are silent miracles. Built centuries ago, often dozens of kilometers long, these sloped tunnels deliver water from mountain springs to desert towns, without pumps, without power, just gravity and geometry. They descend at such a precise angle that the water neither stagnates nor floods. It simply moves, always, quietly. You look up, and there's an older man crouched on the opposite bank, scooping water into a clay jug. He sees you watching and smiles, lifting the jug slightly in salute. Then he vanishes behind a curtain of grapevine. Historians still argue whether qanats were a purely Persian invention or borrowed and improved from earlier Mesopotamian channels. Some say the technology spread to North Africa and even Spain. Others suggest it emerged independently in several arid regions. But few debate their brilliance. Some of these underground canals still function today, outlasting empires and empires' dreams. As you rise, you notice the faint glimmer of something buried in the earth beside the qanat-polished stones, placed deliberately in a ring. You brush some dust aside and discover a shallow pit, lined with ceramic tiles and filled with cool air. A storage hole, possibly for grain, possibly for snow. Or maybe just a clever decoy designed to trick invading armies into thinking the city had more water or more ice than it did. You return to the pavilion with your hands still damp. The nobleman in teal raises an eyebrow as if to ask where you've been. You simply nod toward the flowing channel. He grins, lifts a cup, and takes another sip. Moments later, the steward gestures to a servant who re-emerges with a small tray of confections, soft dates stuffed with ground walnut and bound with threads of candied orange. Alongside it, more chilled sharbat. This time, it's fig and rosewater, with a sliver of crushed almond at the bottom. You've stopped questioning how many variations exist. You just drink. And every time you do, the same thought returns. This should not be possible. Not here. Not in this heat, not in this age. But it is. You lean back once more and let your gaze wander. Beyond the pavilion, desert hills roll lazily toward the sky. The horizon shimmers. Somewhere a camel bell jingles in the distance. And beneath your feet, buried deep below water, continues its secret journey through stone and sand. A noble begins reading poetry aloud, something about a fountain in a land of fire. You can't catch every word, but the rhythm is soothing. Each line ends with a sigh, as if even the verses themselves are tired from the heat. You notice the noble woman beside him gently fanning herself with a palm leaf. Her goblet sweats gently on the table. She dips a finger into the condensation and draws a pattern on the stone, just a circle, just once. Then she smiles and lets the sun erase it. You exhale. The chill is beginning to fade now. The air is warming slightly. The jars are growing lighter, but the calm remains. And with it, the deep hum of something ancient and sure. This isn't just survival, it's grace. You don't realize you've fallen asleep until you wake to the sound of gentle footsteps on stone. For a moment, you're unsure where you are, wrapped in warmth, swaddled in drowsiness, head tilted just so against a silk pillow. The music has stopped. The birds have quieted. Even the breeze has retreated, hiding somewhere behind the lattice work. Only the quiet remains, and yet something's different. The sun has shifted. It's higher now, leaning directly overhead. It's less golden, more insistent. And that cold, dreamy hush that lingered in the air earlier, it's thinning. Like the final few notes of a song you wish wouldn't end. You sit up slowly, blinking against the brightness. The nobleman in teal has vanished, along with several of the guests. A few cushions remain overturned. Empty dishes sparkle faintly with syrupy residue. The boy with the incense burner is asleep in a corner, the censer tilted like a wilted flower in his hand. The steward reappears this time without his previous stiffness. He seems relaxed now, tired, even wiping his brow with a corner of his robe. He doesn't speak, but his gesture is clear time to begin the closing ritual. Servants begin gathering the remaining ice jars. You watch as they're repacked with precise layers of cloth, straw, and wax. Each jar is marked with a symbol, a wave, a palm, a star, denoting its contents, destination, or maybe its handler. You can't be sure. But there's a logic to it. A system honed not by guesses, but by centuries of sand and sweat. One by one, the jars are loaded back onto padded crates, then strapped to the flanks of camels that groan softly. Annoyed to be summoned in the heat of the day, a few of the more experienced handlers shade the animals' heads with strips of dyed linen, saffron, russet, teal. You step aside. As the caravan forms again, ready to vanish the way it came, quietly, reverently, as if the entire miracle had only been a dream. But before they go, one servant breaks from the line and offers you a final treat. It's small, simple. A palm-sized cup carved from stone filled with the last of the ice, barely a spoonful, and just a splash of something golden. You sip it. The flavor hits like a secret lemon cardamom and something smoky. A closing note, the full stop at the end of a sonnet. Historians still wonder whether these feasts were scheduled with the sun in mind, timed so that the cold would last just long enough to impress, then melt gracefully into memory. A perfect vanishing act. You can almost hear the scholar's footnote now. Evidence suggests a performance of perishability was often intentional. You return the empty cup with a nod. The servant disappears into the line. And just like that, the caravan begins its slow ascent into the hills, jars swaying, bells chiming. You watch them go, not with sadness exactly, but with the quiet reverence one reserves for passing comets or particularly well-baked flatbread. The pavilion empties further. The grapes hang limp in the heat. The cushions are no longer quite so plush. Someone sweeps the stone with a straw broom, leaving behind only water stains and crushed petals. You find yourself wandering again, this time toward a patch of shade near the edge of the garden. You sit, you breathe, and then you notice it off to the side beneath an archway nearly hidden in shadow. A chamber. You duck through the low entrance and find a room sunk deep into the earth. The air here is cooler and denser, walls lined with clay amphorae. A faint scent of dried rose, and something herbal, mint perhaps, or safflower. In the center, a long stone bench and a tray bearing scrolls. Recipes, inventories, personal notes. You don't open them. Some things are better left imagined. Instead, you rest your palm on the cool bench, still faintly moist from condensation. A final gift from the ice. You sit there a while, suspended between cold and heat, silence and song now and then. And outside the desert waits hot, vast, indifferent. But it never stood a chance. You emerge from the cool chamber slowly, as if waking from a dream within a dream. The light outside is harsher now, sharper, almost metallic, and it takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. Gone are the silken cushions and the lazy haze of music and sharbat. What remains is the honest, unapologetic blaze of noon in the Persian desert. Everything is quieter. The nobles have retired to shaded quarters. The servants are folding linens, rinsing cups, and packing trays with the kind of focused exhaustion that only midday heat can summon. Even the pigeons have stopped their gossip. You, however, have one more stop to make. You follow the path away from the pavilion, past the Qanat stream, now glittering under full sun, and toward a courtyard lined with low stone walls and fig trees wilting into the shade. At the center sits a marble platform, plain and unadorned save for a modest stone column rising from its center. It's a sundial, functional, elegant, and currently casting a shadow so short it almost disappears into its base. You take a seat on the edge, feet dangling just above the warm sand. From here you can see the rim of the yakhchāl dome in the distance, still stoic and pale, like a lump of old moon trapped in daylight. A young girl walks by with a tray of clay jugs, pausing to offer you one. You accept. its water lightly cooled with a hint of cucumber. You nod your thanks and she disappears as quietly as she arrived. And that's when it hits you. The genius wasn't just in the architecture, it was in the timing, all of it. The ice retrieval, the sorbet, serving the chilled water, had been orchestrated around the single most powerful clock in this landscape, the sun. You retrace the morning in your mind, how the jars were opened just after dawn, how the final sharbat was served just before the sun reached its apex. Every step was a race against time, not to defy the heat, but to predict it, to stay one step ahead. Historians still marvel at how ancient Persians developed such intimate knowledge of solar patterns and thermal behavior. Some argue they used complex astronomical tools. Others suggest it was all experiential, passed down from generation to generation, like a family recipe. Either way, the result was a lifestyle built not in resistance to the desert, but in conversation with it. You sip again. The water's coolness is fading now just slightly, but the memory of ice still lingers on your tongue. A pair of older men passes by deep in conversation, speaking in slow, looping phrases. You catch fragments, dates, distances, wind. You imagine they're talking about delivery routes, or perhaps they're just comparing sunburns, hard to tell. Beyond the courtyard, a row of fig trees cast broken shadows across the ground, their leaves trembling in the light. You wander beneath them, drawn by a sudden flutter of movement. A bird, possibly the same one from earlier, darts from branch to branch, its wings catching slivers of brightness. It pauses on a low limb and watches you curiously, head tilted. You look up, half expecting the creature to say something. Instead, it chirps once and flits away, disappearing into the shimmer of the horizon. You smile. And this time it's not the ice or the engineering that makes you feel calm. It's the realization that cold was never the point. Mastery was. Rhythm was. A way of life designed with such precision and grace that it made room even in its harshest hours for something soft, something cool, something unnecessary but beautiful. You return to the sundial, place your now empty jug on the stone, and stretch your arms toward the sky. Noon has come. The shadow is gone. But somehow the heat feels less cruel, because once you've tasted snow in the desert, you carry the coolness with you, hidden behind the ribs, tucked somewhere soft, like a whispered secret that only you now understand. The courtyard begins to empty its cobbled floor, now bathed in a relentless white light that seems to erase corners, soften edges, and press gently but firmly on every surface. You move slowly now, not because you're tired, though you are, but because speed feels rude in this place. The desert demands your patience and rewards it in curious ways. You find yourself drawn to the back of the courtyard, where a narrow path slips between two fig trees and disappears behind a low wall. No one gestures for you to follow. No sign marks the way. And yet somehow you know it's meant for you. The path curls gently downhill, lined with smooth stones, some of which are painted faintly, with geometric patterns long faded by time. At the end, you come upon a garden, private, humble, and entirely still. A few rose bushes nod lazily in the heat. A clay bench waits in the shade of a pomegranate tree. And there in the center of the garden, a tray has been left. It holds only one item, a shallow bowl made of hammered copper. Inside, a final portion of sorbet, now half melted, shimmering like a puddle of crushed rubies. You sit unsure whether it was meant for someone else, but the silence around you makes it clear this is your farewell gift. You lift the bowl. The sorbet is made from cherry and hibiscus. The color is deep and velvety. You take a spoonful expecting sweetness, but it surprises you. It's tart, sharp, and invigorating, like the last note of a song that won't resolve. You take another, and it's already changed warmer now, softer, as if reminding you that even the coldest moment must eventually yield. This wasn't about luxury. It never was. It was about remembrance. Historians continue to find fragments, poems inscribed on pottery merchant logs, noting ice deliveries, faded frescoes showing gatherings not unlike the one you just witnessed. They piece together a story that seems impossible, a civilization that refuses to be defined by the boundaries nature imposes on it. And yet it wasn't defiance, it was invitation, a quiet one, the kind that says, "Come sit with us. Let the desert be what it is." But let's share a secret, it doesn't have to win. The garden's silence is deep now, not empty, but full of presence. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine what this same spot would feel like under moonlight. Cooler, yes, but also lonelier. The cold would return to the yakhchāl. The sharbat jars would rest in silence, and the caravan would wind once more through the darkness, beginning the cycle again. But for now, the sun lingers. You rise and set the empty bowl back on the tray. The spoon rests beside it like a punctuation mark at the end of a perfect, slightly ridiculous, utterly brilliant sentence. On your way back up the path, you pass a boy sitting on the stones, carving something into a flat piece of clay. He looks up just long enough to smile, then returns to his work. You glance down and see the outline of a jar, a dome, a small figure holding a cup. Maybe he's drawing you? You let him. You don't need to say anything. Because the story's already begun, passing on, not in words, but in gestures, in shapes, in the echo of water through clay tunnels, in cold disappearing slowly under a hot sky. As you return to the main courtyard, the yakhchāl stands still and quiet in the distance. Not empty, just waiting. Waiting for night, waiting for snow, waiting for someone else someday to wonder how did they ever manage this. And maybe, just maybe, they'll taste the answer too. You're not quite ready to leave, not yet. So instead of heading back to the main road, you wander toward the edge of the village, where the shadows stretch longer, and the air shimmers with a mix of heat and memory. It's quieter here. No more music, no trays being balanced, no jars to admire. Just a scattering of homes, low mud walls, and the occasional murmur of conversation drifting from behind woven curtains. And then you spot it. Tucked behind a cluster of palms, partially sunken into the ground, sits another dome. Smaller than the yakhchāl, less ornate, but unmistakably familiar. Its base is worn and the plaster cracked in places. A faded mosaic curls along its base, depicting wave stars and a jug with ice tumbling from its mouth. You step closer. No guards, no stewards, just a doorway half covered with a reed curtain gently flapping in the breeze. You duck inside and feel again that startling brush of cold across your cheeks. Inside is a different kind of stillness, older, dustier, but no less sacred. The space is narrow and rounded, and the ceiling is low. Clay shelves run along the perimeter, each holding what appears to be personal items. A wooden ladle, a bound scroll, and a tiny jar of what smells like cinnamon. This isn't a public space. This is personal. A family ice house, perhaps. A domestic echo of the grand yakhchāl you visited earlier. You realize that while the nobles feasted and toasted and turned cold into theater, others used the same science for quieter miracles, preserving goat's milk, chilling water for a feverish child, offering a cold cloth to a traveler nearly undone by the sun. Historians rarely write about these. There are fewer records and fewer relics. But ask the old women here, and they'll tell you the yakhchāl was the heart of a home, a place where survival met sweetness, where generations passed down not just how to build them, but how to tend them, patch them, and respect them. You crouch and run your hand across the floor, cool still despite the hour. A small bowl rests in the center, filled with crushed herbs and pebble, perhaps a cooling mixture for the air, perhaps just a quiet offering. Outside, you hear laughter, bright, boyish, free. You peek through the curtain and spot two children chasing one another across the dust. One holds a sliver of ice wrapped in cloth like it's a treasure. The other howls with delight and tries to snatch it. The boy with the ice clutches it to his chest and yells something in Persian you don't understand, but the tone is universal. This is mine and it's magic, and I found it first. You smile. They disappear behind a cluster of fig trees, their feet kicking up clouds that catch the light like glitter. Cold may have meant prestige in the palace, but here in this half-forgotten corner it means joy, surprise, a moment of impossible delight. And that's when it strikes you. The true brilliance of the yakhchāl wasn't just that it worked, it's that it worked for everyone. The elite, the laborers, the sick, the young. The rituals may have differed, but the marvel was shared. You sit on the step outside the dome, letting the wall press its coolness into your back, and close your eyes for a moment. You listen to the creak of a rope pulling water from a nearby well, to the flap of laundry in the wind, to the occasional splash of a pigeon in a basin too shallow to be useful and too perfect to be ignored. And you think the desert may be loud with the sun, but the cold speaks softly, and here somehow the cold still speaks. The afternoon wears on, and you wander further from the village following no clear path, just the slight downward slope of land that hints at water or the memory of it. The sun, though still fierce, feels a little softer now, its light less like a command and more like a presence lingering, watching. You cross a patch of cracked clay earth and reach what appears to be a field, though no crops grow here now, just stone outlines, half-buried furrows, and the occasional sprig of wild thyme pushing through where irrigation once flowed. You step carefully, avoiding loose stones, and notice something peculiar. A single clay pipe poked from the ground, like a forgotten reed flute. You crouch beside it, brushing away a layer of dust, and feel the faintest breath of air rising from within, cool, moist, and ancient. You've found one of the underground channels a Kanat's breath. You lie down beside it and listen. It hums. Not like music, not exactly. More like an exhale stretched over centuries. It carries the temperature of shade, the whisper of mountain snow, and the knowledge of men who knew how to speak to stone. And as you listen, your mind drifts. You imagine the men who built this, scraping, tunneling, chiseling through earth and time 1 degree at a time. No GPS, no drones, just intuition. Passed down from father to son, mapped by shadow and instinct. Historians still debate how these engineers determined angles so exact that the water could flow unseen across miles without stagnation or flooding. Some claim they used plumb lines and the stars. Others believe it was done by rhythm. Dig a little, listen, wait. The truth, as always, may live somewhere in between calculation and trust. You rise and follow the line of sunken vents, small circular mouths in the ground, each one spaced evenly apart, like a constellation fallen gently onto the earth. These were used for airflow maintenance, and more than anything, hope. Further down the slope, the air shifts again, and suddenly, there it is. A small stone building half submerged into a mound with a wooden awning stretched over its entrance. This, you soon learn, is a cold room, a gathering spot for workers who tended the Kanat, repaired the vents, and kept the system alive. Inside, it's dark, but not empty. You step through the low doorway into a vaulted chamber, cool as early as dawn. A few benches line the walls. A pitcher of water covered with a linen cloth waits patiently in the shade. There are etchings here, too, on the walls, in the stone names, perhaps, or dates, or prayers. You sit. The quiet wraps around you like a blanket pulled from storage, musty, comforting, a little frayed. There's no ceremony here, no feasts, no perfumes or poets, just function. But that, you realize, is its own kind of reverence. You close your eyes and feel the cold sink into your bones, not harshly, but like a memory long buried coming back into focus. You think of the ice, the jars, the laughter, the luxury, and then you think of this, the source, the root, the secret river beneath everything, the invisible thread that stitched together palaces and homes, boys and nobles, fields and feast tables. And you realize it was never about the ice. It was about the flow, the constant movement beneath the surface. The belief is that even in a land where the sun rules everything, water, and with it life, can be coaxed to appear quietly, dependably, like a friend who never forgets your name. You rise, touch the stone one last time, and step back into the light. The shadows have begun to stretch again. The air smells like dust and cumin and distant fig smoke. And somewhere below, the Kanat keeps flowing, silent, unseen, eternal. The road back into the village is slower now. Not because your legs are tired, though they are, but because something inside you is reluctant to let this day end. You walk with a rhythm that matches the desert wind, slow and warm, with just the hint of cool that clings to the folds of your robe. The main square is nearly empty. Most have retreated indoors for rest or quiet labor in shaded corners. But as you pass beneath a vine-draped archway, you hear the low hum of voices, a gathering small and unhurried. You follow the sound to a shaded alcove where a circle of elders has formed around a low, fireless hearth. No flames needed. It's too warm for that. But the hearth gives shape to their stories, anchoring the moment like punctuation in a poem. You settle near the edge, unnoticed, content to simply listen. One of the elders speaks, his voice soft and unbroken. He's describing a summer long ago when the ice delivery was delayed by 2 days, and the wedding guests nearly rioted until a young apprentice, barefoot and too proud, found a forgotten cache buried behind the temple cistern. He served it in chipped bowls with quince syrup, and the bride wept because it was perfect. Laughter ripples through the group, not mocking but affectionate. Someone claps the storyteller on the shoulder. Another adds, "She still says it was better than the marriage." More laughter. You smile, feeling like you've stumbled into a memory that belongs to everyone and no one at once. They move on to other tales, some facts, some legends. A merchant who once sold counterfeit ice made from pressed chalk. A noble woman who kept a yakhchāl just for cooling her perfume. A drought year when the only remaining snow was rationed like gold, 1 cup per household, no refills. Historians may never write these down, but here, under this sun and these vines, they're more real than scrolls. Eventually, the circle breaks. A few elders rise slow but steady and drift off toward rest. One pauses beside you. He doesn't say anything, just looks at you with eyes that have seen more desserts than calendars can count. He nods once, approval, recognition, maybe even welcome. And then he's gone. You rise and begin walking again. The streets are bathed in a lazy golden hue. Now everything touched with that late afternoon kindness that makes even the stones seem soft. You pass a market stall shuttering for the day, its spices tucked beneath linen covers. A boy ties up bundles of mint and hangs them in the shade. Somewhere a flute plays a low, wandering tune, less a melody than a thought drifting through reed and breath. And there, leaning against a whitewashed wall, you see it again. A servant familiar in gait, if not in face, balancing a sealed ceramic jar against his hip. Not for show, not for you, just doing his job, moving ice. He glances up, catches your eye, and for a brief second smiles, just a little. It's enough, because in that moment you realize the truth. This isn't history. This is daily life, stitched together from careful habit and impossible patience. Ice in the desert isn't a miracle. It's a craft, a ritual, a rhythm too precise to be rushed, too humble to demand applause. And you've become part of it, not as a guest, not even as a witness, but as someone who knows what it means to taste cold when everything around you burns. You turn toward the yakhchāl one last time. It glows faintly in the late sun, its dome casting a shadow long and round across the sand, not ancient, not forgotten, simply present, still holding the cold, still holding the past, still waiting. As the evening ripens, you find yourself back at the outskirts of the village, where the yakhchāl stands watchful and still, its pale dome now glowing with the faint blush of sunset. The light gives it an ethereal warmth, though the knowledge of what it holds inside still sends a phantom chill across your skin. You sit at a low wall near its base, resting your back against the cool plaster, and let the silence settle. It's not empty. It never is here. The desert always has something to say. You just have to get quiet enough to hear it. And tonight it's telling you about endings. You start noticing them all around. The fig trees curled their leaves inward for the night. The last few goats were ushered behind wooden gates. The marketplace shuttered and swept. Even the air changes less dusty now, more deliberate, carrying the scent of something sweet cooking in a distant kitchen. Lentils, perhaps. Or date syrup melting into flatbread. And then the stars. They begin slowly shy at first. A glimmer here, a pinprick there. And before you know it, the sky blooms with constellations that look exactly as they did the day the first yakhchāl was built. You tilt your head and wonder how many nights they watched, how many cool breaths they witnessed rising from the dome below. A young girl appears from one of the side paths, dragging a woven basket. She kneels beside the yakhchāl, opens a tiny hatch near its base, and carefully deposits something wrapped in cloth. Then she closes the hatch and pats the wall like you'd pat the shoulder of a friend. She sees you, gives a small wave, and vanishes into the dark without a word. You sit there thinking, historians still question how much of ancient Persian life was wrapped around the yakhchāl, not just practically but spiritually. Was it seen as a shrine, a communal vault, a place where cold wasn't just a sensation, but a symbol of balance, of foresight, of the beautiful audacity to preserve in a world that devours? No scroll has the answer, but here beneath the stars, watching villagers still tend to it like a living creature, you feel the truth ripple beneath your ribs. A warm breeze stirs your robe, and you stand brushing dust from your hands. You walk once more around the yakhchāl's base, letting your fingers trace the rough wall, its scars, its curves, its impossible wisdom. The night air is thick with hush, broken only by the faint gurgle of water from the Qanat stream somewhere below. The heartbeat of it all. And that's when you see it, carved faintly into a brick near the back, nearly invisible, unless you're searching for nothing at all, is a single word in ancient Persian script. It means breath. No date, no signature, just that. You step back, hands at your side, and let your lungs fill slowly. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. You understand now. Cold isn't the opposite of heat here. It's the rhythm that lives between extremes. The quiet middle, the moment of breath, the space between footsteps, the hush between the stories. You take one final look at the dome lit now only by moonlight and whisper a thank you. You're not entirely sure is meant for the building, the builders, or the land itself. Probably all three. Then you turn toward the village, toward sleep, toward whatever comes next. Behind you, the yakhchāl stands, unmoving, unmoved, unmelting. You walk slowly now, feet brushing over fine sand that glows faintly in the moonlight. The village behind you has folded into itself, Doors, latched lanterns, dimmed windows breathing out a final warmth before the hush sets in for good. It's that time of night where even time feels like it's resting, curled up somewhere quiet. You follow a narrow trail uphill, one last path, just to see where it leads. The stars above you are fearless and abundant, so many that your eyes don't know where to settle. Some pulse gently, others gleam sharp and steady, and somewhere in between a few seem to move slow, drifting specks that might be stars, might be dreams, it doesn't really matter. At the top of the hill is a bench carved into a natural ledge of stone, smooth from generations of sitting. You ease down the rock, still holding a whisper of the day's warmth, and look out across the land. There it is. The yakhchāl. Even from here, it looks unreal. Moonlight catches its curve just right, and for a breathless moment, it seems to levitate a pale dome, suspended in ink. The village huddles around it like a secret kept by generations. Beyond that, a desert soft and endless, stretching toward the unseen mountains where ice is born. And below your feet, always moving, the qanats whisper on. You take a deep breath, filling your chest with cool air that feels older than you can comprehend. It settles in your bones. It steadies you. Then you notice something tucked into the rock beside the bench. A bowl, shallow clay, painted with a pattern so faded it looks like smoke. Inside, a few melting petals, a sprig of mint, a tiny sliver of ice already turning to dew, a gesture, an echo. Someone was here before you. You smile and sit back. Maybe that's the point of all of this. Not the spectacle, not the science, not even the sorbet, but the passing on. The reminder that someone built this once carefully, lovingly, not just to chill water or impress kings, but to say, we were here. We understood the sun, and we left something cool behind for you. Historians debate timelines, purposes, and materials, but none of them have seen this view. None of them has sat here on this hill with a sliver of melting cold on their palm in a sky too wide to hold. Because of this moment, it doesn't go in books. It goes in a breath. So you close your eyes, let your shoulders fall, let your breath slow, let the quiet fold over you like linen drawn across a sleeping face. Let the cold linger just a little longer. Let the desert hum. Let the stars watch. And let it all become part of you. Word count 101. Wind down 300 words. And now, as the last of the stars find their rhythm above, and the dome of the yakhchāl fades into the fabric of night, let's let our pace soften too. No need to hold on to any thoughts now. You've walked the dust paths, felt the cool air of a stone chamber, tasted snow in the desert, and listened to stories older than paper. That's enough for one night. Let the sound of water flowing beneath your feet become quieter. Let the memory of crushed ice, soft petals, and cold fingers in heat drift to the edges of your mind. No more footsteps to follow. No more names to remember. Just stillness. Let your body sink. You're safe here. Or the wind doesn't bite, it soothes. The air no longer presses, it lifts. And if you listen closely, the silence isn't empty. It's full of everything that brought you here. Every breath is a desert breath, now slow, dry grounding. Let it slow further. Let your thoughts dissolve like rose syrup in snow. Let the cold, impossible miracle of it all settle gently into the corners of your heart. Something to keep, something to return to. You've walked with kings and laborers. You've shared a table with strangers who knew the value of timing, of care, of coolness in the heat. You've seen what it means to preserve not just things but rituals, not just water but wonder. And now the night has you, so let go, rest, sleep. The desert will keep flowing, the yakhchāl will keep breathing, and the cold will be waiting, just in case you ever need it again.